Welcome back to a D group this week. Why do we do D groups? D groups are just a way for us to refer to a discipleship group. We want our men to be involved in small group discipleship. It's a great way for us to grow in a relationship to Christ is in groups. Where Christianity is designed to be a community endeavor, and so you can sit in the community of the church on Sunday mornings and grow, but we know you grow deeper, you really enter into those moments of life transformation when you get into smaller group settings and discuss more fully and more deeply what the Bible has to say in your own walk with Christ. And so we want men to be in some kind of discipleship group, and so men's fraternity discussion groups are not just for discussion, they're discipleship groups. So that's what a D group is, your small group time. And we're glad that you're part of it and want to encourage that and encourage you to invite others to do that. But each time we gather, we also want this moment of teaching. So today, as we think about this chapter from Sound Doctrine, the chapter is this: Sound Doctrine is for love. What are we talking about when we think about sound doctrines for love? 1 John chapter 4, verse 19 says this: we love because He first loved us. We love in response to the love of God. And so as we think about how does sound doctrine impact us loving one another, loving others, how do those two things fit together? The author used this illustration of a sailboat, that love in the world is sometimes viewed as a wind. It blows where it wants to and takes you where it wants you to go. So you feel love towards a person or a thing, and that's good. And then that wind can change. That's not what the illustration would be coming from the Bible. In fact, the author wants us to see it more like this: that God is blowing a constant wind of love. His love for us is constant, and we respond to His love by raising the sails, and that moves us. So we love because He first loved us. He's blowing a wind of love constantly, and our response is we raise a sail, catch that love, and it moves us to where He wants us to be. We know this to be true. What we know affects what we believe, and what we believe affects what we do. So we know God's love is constant, therefore that knowledge affects what we believe about who God is and about who others are, and then our action of loving others moves from that. So our love is a response to His love. And that's the illustration that the author's trying to use with the sailboat. Our lives should be driven by His constant love. He also asks this question: are love and doctrine enemies? Because it's a book about sound doctrine, and he's talking about love. And in much of our world today, there's a view that love and doctrine are at odds, especially in the church. As your doctrine increases, you become less loving. And if you want to be more loving as a body or as a church, then you've got to kind of do away with some of your doctrine. And of course, the author here is arguing that, in fact, not only is that untrue, but without sound doctrine, we can't love properly. So are love and doctrine enemies? He would say no. And in fact, he uses the illustration of 2 John. We just read from 1 John, but the letter of 2 John is to the elect lady and the children in her household, an image of a local church. And he says, I love this church in truth. We love by truth. We know Ephesians 4 tells us that we're to speak the truth in love. So love and truth are supposed to go hand in hand according to the Scripture. Love can be commanded. God commands us to love one another, to love Him. Love can be stirred up in one another. We're told to not forsake the assembling of ourselves together, but to stir one another up in love and good deeds. So love and doctrine are connected from a biblical standpoint. How is that connected? Sound doctrine, the chapter tells us, is for love. Doctrine, the doctrine of God, leads us to love God. So when we think about just what do we know about God? Well, one thing we just read, God is love. So we love because He loved us. We respond to His love. The doctrine of God leads us to love God first. The doctrine of man guides us to love our neighbors. We know that man is made in the image of God. And we know that men are sinners and need to be forgiven. So we should be driven to love mankind because they're in God's image and they need Christ. The doctrine of providence teaches us to love our enemies. God brings the rain on the evil and the good. So how are we to respond to people, even our enemies? The doctrine of redemption teaches husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church. It's a picture of God's love, and the illustration is, so husbands love your wives that way. The doctrine of God's love teaches us to love other believers. In fact, 1 John, where we read a moment ago, chapter 4, says, you can say that you love God, but if you don't love your brother, you're lying. It can't be true. So we see love and doctrine fit together, and that's what the chapter is going to argue. We hope that as you've read that chapter and begin to discuss that today, that you figure out how to put that better into your life, that your doctrine, sound doctrine, healthy doctrine, will drive you to love. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.